Test. Nothing still. Test. There we go. All right. We are going to call this meeting for the State and Local Government Subcommittee to order. First order of business is going to be to go ahead and do our prayer. Representative Lumsden has offered to do it for us.
You would bow with me. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love and your goodness to us and for watching over us and caring for us. We thank you for the opportunity that you've given to each of us here today to do the work of the people of the state. We just ask for your wisdom and your guidance and your direction as we go about trying to do that on their behalf. We pray these things in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.
Amen. All right, so we've got three meetings on the agenda, or three bills on the agenda today. The first is SB 12 by Senator Ginn. Senator Ginn, my understanding is you have a substitute. That's what number do you have? The bill number, or the LC version I have, is 473491S. Mr. Senator, I recognize you. Go ahead and present. Oh, hold on. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, just so the members of the committee are clear on why I brought the bill, this past summer, the Supreme Court of Georgia ruled in a case involving a contractor that was working for Georgia Tech that was a little bit unclear in the law. I think they made the right ruling, but they basically said that, you know, as a private contractor, he would fall under the Open Records Act. Now, when that happened, I spoke with the governor, and I spoke to several folks that are in the business community, and I said, look, the reason it's an open record is because it's public funds that are being spent for a public purpose. And with the great help of Mr. Morelli, and I want to brag on and he wasn't included in the prayer, but Rushi, that helped a great bit on this bill, said and I'd like to thank him here for this, but we had testimony from different groups when it started in the Senate. We worked with the First Amendment Foundation, the Georgia Press Association to make some changes in the bill. We've got those changes made. I think they're I won't say they're in support, but they're neutral on the bills. But my understanding is I do have support from GMA and ACCG. The bill basically says when you want to make an open records request, it goes to the government entity that caused it to be an open record. If there's a reason for them to reach out to the private contractor that's doing work, that it requires that they do that. So what you see in front of you, there was a typo in the bill when it left the Senate, unfortunately. They made a tweak, just kind of cleared the records on it. But the technical questions I leave to my lawyers, and I will tell you, and it's nice to be with my local government folks. In the Senate, they assign it to judiciary, and I've only made one other judiciary appearance in my 15 years in the Senate, and they're no fun. Don't tell Brian Strickland that, because he did help on the bill, and I will brag on Chairman Strickland.
We'll try to make this a little less painful for you. So we have a couple questions. I'll go ahead and Representative Montaham.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just reading through the bill here. Trying to make, I agree with the idea here about understanding its implications for the Supreme Court decision. But I'm just trying to understand here. Really, it surrounds lines 30 and 31. So it says, and we've got a lot of ors here. So or on 25 and 2 on 27. And so I'm just kind of reading through this, trying to conceptualize all this in the performance of the last one, which is 30. Such private persons or private entities shall be required to produce such public records to a custodian upon request from such custodian. And the reason I ask that, I think, is what is let's contemplate a contractor who was engage in regular course of business with the government. Maybe they were a contractor doing construction, or they were doing a litany of different things. Who knows what they were doing, but it was public performance. And so the question becomes, how long is the expectation that a private company should have to keep those records? Because if they're being compelled to produce those records, I'm kind of worried about what is the depth and the breadth of that requirement.
One of the things that we're trying to do with the legislation is not add any additional record-keeping requirements for a contractor or for the government. We're not changing the definition of what an open record is. But what this would actually do, if let's just say the guy's cutting grass at City Hall, and he ran over a fixture, a light fixture, and he had the fixture fixed, and somebody made an open record request about the light fixture getting damaged with the mower. Instead of making that request to the private contractor that's mowing the grass, they would make that records request to City Hall. City Hall, if they didn't have the records, they could request them from the contractor and get that resolved, that question answered. But as a private contractor, he may only be required for tax purposes to keep that record for, let's say until it was 3 years over his audit for his IRS purposes or something. I'm not sure what the record keeping requirement is for a contractor that repairs a light, or what that would be. But we're not addressing that. We're not going into the changing anything in that regards to the law. But if City Hall wanted to know, hey, we had an open records request for fixing the light bulb that you hit with a mower, hey, here's what you did. So, and I'll let Mr. Patel said the.
Okay.
Yeah,
If I may, I'll enter to a discourse here, Mr. Chairman, with the presenter. I do have some more questions.
I'll tell you what, let's do this. Hold the rest of your questions. I'll give you the opportunity to
Sure.
ask more at the end.
Thank you.
And same with you. Let's go ahead and let Ruchi. Why don't you, Ruchi, I know that you've signed up to present. Go ahead and do your presentation, and then we'll let both of you all tandem answer questions at the end, if everybody's agreeable.
Well, sure. And Rishi Patel with the Georgia Municipal Association. And my presentation is pretty simple. As Senator Gann covered it, as we support this legislation. We worked really hard with him, the First Amendment Foundation, the Press Association, and the Senate in getting this language together. And so we were just signing up to say that we support this legislation and working with Senator Gann. To answer your question, there's records retention schedules under state law that this bill is not impacting and not touching. And those records retention schedules basically depend on what kind of record you're talking about. So some records are transitory. You can throw them out as soon as you're done with them. Some records are required to be kept for a really long period of time. So on a city record, city minutes, for instance, are supposed to be kept forever, right? Minutes of meetings. But typically when you contract with an entity, you're going to have some clauses in that contract that say, we expect you to keep those records for 3 years after the termination of this contract or something like that. So you would have provisions in the contract that govern how long you expect the contractor to keep the records.
Okay, so Representative Sanchez had a question, and then Representative Martin, I'll recognize you after.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. So I think I definitely see legitimate concerns that the bill addresses here. And so my main question is around the public's right of access to public records. So if a request is made to the government, but a private contractor does not meet the requirement for those records, how could a private citizen seek enforcement of that request?
So the enforcement of the request, this bill is addressing who the records request goes to.
Right.
So it goes to the government. The enforcement of the request would go against the government here, but there's a penalties provision. I think it's 50-18-73 that says penalties can be held against anyone who violates the Open Records Act. And so if a private party basically gives their thumb to their nose to the government when the government says, hey, you have our record, we need it to come to you, or we need to get it back so we can respond to this open records request, that penalty provision can still be applicable in this situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Should I ask my second question after Mount Tahan, or should I
I'll go
continue?
ahead and recognize you. Go ahead.
Okay,
Ask your
thank
last
you.
question.
And then the other question around the definition, charge, custody, care, and control. So is this definition defined, or let me ask it this way. If, say, an agency has a secondary copy of the record that is requested, would they be able to, like, would that count as being in charge of, or in custody, or in care, or of in control of that record, or would that not count in this situation?
What's a secondary copy? I'm not sure if I understand you. You said secondary copy?
Yeah, so like not the original copy of the record. Say they have like a secondary copy of it that isn't.
Electronic copies are legal in Georgia, so they're recognized in the court system. And I do want to let the members of the committee know, we had great response and support from not only ACCG and GMA, but the Georgia Chamber, the Metro Atlanta Chamber, a lot of trade organizations. A lot of folks are looking at this because they recognize that this is clearly what the intent was to make those open records requests go to the local government, or could be the state government, if we have a state government request, and not to hinder private business in Georgia.
Right, and I understand that. I'm just trying to make sure there's not like, if the definition of what is custody or care, charge, or control of a record, like if a government agency could dodge that by saying, the ways that they could dodge that.
We understand that, and that's one of the things that we spelled out in the bill, that if there was a local government that said, hey, we want to give all our records to our attorney that now are not going to be, these are not going to be open records, that's not allowed.
Okay.
We didn't make anything, you can't cover up anything that there are some exclusions for, things like a private business if
Right.
they had a trade secret that, you wanted to try to get to. There's exemptions in the law.
Right.
And this is where, for me, this is really a pro-business bill.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Representative Montaham.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm trying to get there where I agree with you that it is a pro-business bill. I'm still kind of hung up on the requirements, the storage requirements on these. So in your testimony, Rusi, I think you said that. I think you told me that there's all the requirements to keep these are across the board. Is that correct? So some things are infinite, obviously, like minutes, right? I would imagine in one scenario that somebody wouldn't have to keep that forever, that you would not outsource that information. I guess I'm still hung up on the fact that, for tax purposes, let's say IRS, federal tax purposes, you would keep that for 7 years, right? Mm-hmm. But under Article 5 of this chapter, and I'm not sure, maybe we can ask our attorney, I would imagine that definition is for the agency and not for the private person. So what I want to avoid here is somebody engages with some business with a local municipality or county or city. In 15 years down the road, you've got somebody who is coming to this contractor, or they're cutting grass or building a building, and saying, we compel you to do this under state law, mm-hmm. which is allowable here. And I don't know that is that's proper to not have those. If we're going to compel a private entity or private person to hold on to that data, that we shouldn't also put in the guardrails as well to protect those businesses. I would say, in this, could we say, for no longer than 7 years? I mean, would you be amenable to, those kinds of safeguards for citizens and private businesses?
Well, I think the challenge is there's all types of different records. And so, and Mr. Morelli can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the records retention schedule applies to the records themselves. And so no matter where the records are held, it applies to the record. So when I teach an open records class to city officials, I'll talk about different types of records. You could have an email to a coworker that says, hey, let's go grab lunch. That's not a record that's going to need to be kept for any long period of time. But the other end of the extreme, obviously, is something like minutes. And so that's the same thing that's going to apply to records with a private contractor. Now, this bill does not impact that, does not change that at all. And one thing we'd like to point out here is why this is a pro-business bill is right now, under that Supreme Court ruling Senator Ginn was talking about, is these records requests can go to private businesses right now under the current law, and a lot of those businesses won't have a clue what the Open Records Act is, and they won't know how to address it, they won't know how to comply with it, and that's the real problem. And that's why we're in support of this bill, is that we think that those records requests should go to the government, who gets training on it and who knows how to comply with it and can work with those contractors and say, hey, this is the funnel that's going to go through. On the records retention end of things, is a lot of those contracts with those private contractors are going to have some time periods in there, but it's the record itself that has to comply with the records retention schedule, not the entity itself, so not the private party. It's the record itself that needs to fall into whatever category it is. And that's why it's probably more important for it to be going through the local government, because the local government will know how to communicate that with their contractor.
So follow-up question, Chairman, and as we
Yeah,
enter the discourse,
recognize
I guess I'm still struggling with that because let's contemplate a different scenario.
Sure.
Where a local government has entered into an agreement with a vendor of software that keeps up with minutes. Okay, so this is a company, who knows from what, could be from out of the country, right? Could be a foreign entity, could be a foreign entity within the United States, so outside of the state of Georgia, and that business closes its doors. We're still compelling private people. So in that case, I guess my question would be, who are we compelling and to what extent? And further, let's say that they're using Amazon AWS, right? Long-term glacial storage for this stuff. Are we also compelling their vendors as a private entity to go back and do some type of data retention or gathering? I guess without some finite set, day certain that this is no longer needs to be retained, I think.
Well, the compelling would be to the government, because it's the government's responsibility to make sure that the records that need to be kept for an X amount of period of time are being kept for that X amount of period of time. So the compelling of those records goes to the government, and the government's responsibility with AWS or whoever else the private contractor is going to be to ensure with whatever agreement they have with them to say, hey, in this agreement with, if you're storing our minutes, we need to ensure those minutes are properly stored for the retention schedule. But it's ultimately the responsibility of the government itself, because they're the ones that create the record. They're the ones that are supposed to house the record. They're the ones that are supposed to respond to the open record. It's their responsibility to comply with an open records request. So at the end of the day, it's going to be the government itself that has the responsibility.
Okay, last question I have for you. I think this will give me some clarity. And I'm not opposed to your bill. I just want to make sure that we're not going to leave this as an open end for state contractors. And that is, what happens if it says such, private persons or private entities shall be required to produce? What if they don't?
Well, yeah.
And that's where the any citizen can file, and they would file against the government to say, hey, you didn't follow this. They can take civil action, take them to court. And that would be, they would take the local government to court, and then the government would be there with court, whoever the person is that wants to take them there, and I'm sure at that point they're going to bring in the local contractor and say, hey, here's a court order to produce those records. And that's where, for me, that's the same thing that happens today. If you're a government entity and you don't follow the Open Records Act, you go to civil court. So the judge can compel you, and if you fail to comply, I heard a case, I believe it was yesterday, about a failure for somebody to comply with the Open Records Act, and there's some pretty good penalties if you don't follow the Open Records Act. And that's why, for me, because private enterprise, it was interesting. This past weekend, I was with a well driller. Said that he said, "What's the Open Records Act?" We were talking about different bills and things, and he had no idea what the Open Records Act is. So you send a request to a private contractor, they're probably just going to round file it or ignore it because they don't know what it is. And what we don't want to do is hinder the businesses in Georgia when the reason it's an open records request is because it's public funds being spent. So that request would go to the public agency, whether that be a state or a local agency, to make that request.
And one thing I'll add is, and I pulled it up while Senator Ginn was chatting, is one of the problems with the current state of the law is that the current state of the law has definitions that say the records request can go to the government or can go to a private agency. The process in the current state of the law says the process only applies to the government. And then the penalties apply to both the government and the private parties. And so we're not changing the penalties. The penalties are still going to apply to the government and the private parties. And we're not changing the process. The process is still for the government. But the records request should go to the government, not to the government and the private parties, or the private parties. And so when you look at the penalties provision, it says, the superior courts of the state shall have jurisdiction in law and in equity to entertain actions against persons or agencies, agencies being the government, persons obviously being anybody. And so that's where that's not being changed.
Test. I got a sticky flat screen button that doesn't exist but does up here. I don't have any more questions. At this point, if there, say I'm open to take a motion.
Yep, that's right for the amendment.
Well, we'll get to that. So, motion do pass? Second? Okay. We'll open up the floor for any discussion.
Just amendment on the.
Okay.
When you're ready.
So I'll entertain an amendment here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll call this the Montahan Amendment. Or the Montahan Thomas Amendment.
However you want to put it.
I think great minds think alike. We're over here writing together. Nothing like the movie Ghost, though. Let's see. As long as, okay, so after line 28, I'm guessing this is, I was going to put it after the period on custodian.
Yeah, it should go on after 31.
31, not 28, yeah, okay. So after line 31, striking the period and adding as long as it's within the prescribed statutory guidelines or as defined in the agreement, whichever comes later.
So I can read that again if you'd like me to, Rushi.
Sure.
Sometimes you can't understand Martin.
He's speaking Japanese. I've been in Japan.
So what we want
We
to
have
do
to
is just
understand
further
that.
clarify what it is that you've gotten. So it says as follows, after line 31, striking the period and adding this language. As long, okay, I'll read from line 30. Such private persons or private entities shall be required to produce such public records to a custodian upon request from such custodian, as long as it's within the prescribed statutory guidelines or as defined in the agreement, whichever comes later. So it just clarifies, to me, it's a pretty simple clarification. I think that takes care of Representative Montahan. Would you be friendly to that amendment, Senator Gann?
If that's what the committee chooses to do and it makes it easy for y'all to deal with, that shouldn't present any problem for me.
Mr. Chairman, I think it makes it extra pro-business.
So, again, you and I work together on drawing this up real fast. So I've got a motion for an amendment. I need a second.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor of the Montahan Thomas amendment?
I thought it was the Thomas Montahan.
Listen, it's like that movie, I'm telling you.
Okay, all right, let's cut out. We got a motion on in front of the committee. So I would take it for a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? All right, we got one no. With that, it sounds like the amendment passes, and now we'll go ahead and take up motion on the full bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and the motion passes. Thank you, Senator.
Thank
Gann.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your committee's time.
Sorry.
And,
Oh yeah, by the way, Senator, again, this will be in full committee tomorrow.
okay, thank you very much. And that'll be undetermined time or 3 o'clock?
3 o'clock.
Thank you very much for your help.
Absolutely, thank you. Let's see. We're going to stand at ease here for just a second. We were going to move on to Senate Bill 284. Senator Jackson's here. Yeah, but we're going to move on to Senate Bill 284. I'm going to call it up next. We have, I know Senator Walker is not here at the moment, so bear with me here, and I'll come back in just a second. All right, thank you all for bearing with me. Senator Walker is not going to be able to make the presentation of the bill. He's got someone who's presenting as a surrogate. It's Nuala Zaharis. Did I say that right? Thank you. Okay, and she's from the Secretary of State's office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. My name is Nuala Zaharis. I'm here on behalf of Senator Walker, who is sponsoring this bill, SB 284. I work for the Secretary of State's office. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of Securities and the Division Director for the Securities Division, as well as the Charities and Cemeteries Division. This particular bill that you have in front of you, I think you have a copy, I hope. Yes. It's really about investment fraud. It speaks to investment fraud. And I wanted to just come out and just tell you straight out that investment fraud has actually hit each and every one of your districts. We have over, right now, 300 cases that we're investigating on potential investment fraud. But 7 of our biggest cases, which involve not just Georgians, but they are multi-state cases, which means that we're working with other, states, our sister states, with these cases with our victims. We identified victims in each and every one of the districts that the members of this committee are on. And some of the victims or some of the districts they targeted were, of course, larger population districts. But we had one area, Cornelia, which one of our investment fraud cases involved crypto investment, and one of the highest concentrated areas of victims were in Cornelia. So it's there. And when we talk to our victims, because we do talk to our Georgia victims, we have the list, we get their names, and we call them up. One of the things that they ask us, they always ask us, is one question: can you help me get my money back? All right? That's what they ask. The real answer to that question is no, under the current Securities Act, but we'll try. Well, this bill gives us a way to help you, give us a way to get money back to your constituents who lose it. And what we're asking is that in the bill, I'm sorry, you have to bear with me, I'm not used to presenting bills. In line 26 is where we're making the change, 26 to 32. We're asking you to allow us to be able to order for lack of a better word, a refund of the investment. For example, if your constituent in Holly Springs, because we have some victims from Holly Springs, put in $5,000 and we would be able to, in a final order, if they're found to have violated the fraud provisions of the Securities Act, we would be able to say you have to pay back, Nuala or this victim here what that victim put in. Like they put in $5,000, they need to get their $5,000 back. In addition to levying the fines that we already are able to do, because we can issue civil penalties of up to $500,000. But trust me, when you talk to an investor, especially, just a regular Georgian that's put in inadvertently all of their life savings, they don't care about the state getting $500,000. They don't even care about the guy, us reporting him to the local DA or the AG and trying to do criminal prosecution. All they want is their money back. And so this bill provides us an additional tool to put in our toolbox to help your constituents. And I'll take questions.
Great. You actually have a couple up. We'll start off by recognizing Chairman Anderson.
Thank you, and thank you for stepping in for Senator Walker to present this bill. It's a difficult time to coordinate meetings, I do know that. On behalf of the citizens of Cornelia, which I represent,
Oh, okay.
thank you.
Oh, you're
Thank you
welcome.
for bringing this, and
Yes.
thank you for addressing this issue.
Yes.
So, and Mr. Chairman, that was it. I just wanted to thank the department.
All right, Representative Bernal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if it's in the bill, but who pays the money back?
Oh, the bad actor would pay the money back. Because right now, the way it's structured is that the Georgia Securities Act is an administrative act. So when we bring them in, they have a due process. So we will, do a notice of a hearing, bring them in. They have a right to a hearing. At the end, if the hearing officer finds that they have committed securities fraud, then they are the bad actor is the one who's levied with the fines. The fine starts at $10,000 and can go up to $500,000. And those are civil penalties, which are penalties that are administrative fines that are paid to the state. So in this case, we would be able to ask the bad actor to also, in addition to fines, first and foremost, pay back the citizen now, or the constituent. Now, we do have some cases where we've been able to negotiate a couple of cases with these bad actors that, instead of finding you that you have found that you've violated the Securities Act, we'll step away from that, and we won't even fine you, money as long as you give back the investors the money back. And we have one such case where the bad actor is actually an international. He's not even in the United States. He's in another country. We were lucky to be able to do a deal like that with him, to get a settlement, to be able to get the people back their money. However, that doesn't stop him from continuing
That's
his.
what I was going to ask.
And also, because we cut that particular, I hate to call it deal, made that settlement, negotiated settlement, we can't tell everyone that this particular person is committing fraud. We have to take that out, right?
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask you. What would stop them from doing it again and again? So these individuals that you're going after, they must have a lot of money because they still have the money that they've stolen. What happens if someone doesn't have any, that they've used up all the funds?
So this is what the best that we can do is at that point, we can't go to court, but we can ask the AG's office to go to court for us and represent us there so that they can enforce the order and get, the courts, the Superior Court to enforce that order and try to get the money,
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Representative Burnell, I think lines 26 through 28 addresses your first question about who the directing the person to return to the investors. I think that might answer your question. So,
Okay.
yeah, Representative Montahan.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for presenting the bill. I have a question that you may find odd here, but on line 30 and 31. Says a violation of code section, continues to say, or that the person has material aided or is material aiding in an act, practice, or course of business constituting a violation of the code section. But if we go back to the kind of enabling language here on line 16, it also adds or is about to material aid in act, practice, or course of business. And so can you describe to me why, and I think that's weird, I think or is about to material aid is kind of a weird thing to have in law, because it's like that Tom Cruise movie with Minority Report. It's like they know what you're going to do in the future and can be penalized for it. But I'm trying to understand what the difference is there. Maybe you have an answer to that.
So, in a minute, I'll probably ask the attorneys who helped draft this, bring it on, but let me answer by saying this. In this particular one, in securities, under the Securities Act, we can fine individuals for simple things, for books and records violations, right? And for getting to register. But what we did in this particular case, those are, I hate to say innocent, but those are inadvertent, where good businesses or legitimate businesses may not know that they have certain obligations. They violate the act inadvertently. So we don't want to levy these kinds of things. They don't hurt their investors. So in this particular wording, we structured it where it would only pertain to if it involves fraud, if they have been found to have violated the fraud provisions. Not that they're about to do it, but that once we've gotten our investigation, once we've done a hearing, we've had the hearing officer, the hearing in front of the hearing officer, and they have been found to have violated the fraud provisions, then they will be able to get that refund. Does that answer, or do you still need more legal help with that?
No, I think so. So you're saying, is that for line 19?
I'm saying that's for the way that we wrote it, but if I can have our
I'll
attorney.
say this, under line 19, this is the issue and order directing the person to cease and desist. Is that why there's a difference between or is about to material aid?
So hello, Subcommittee. My name is Christina Hurd. I'm the Senior Enforcement Attorney here at the Division. And I wanted to give a little color. So you were asking about line 19?
19 here.
Well,
Yeah, I'm going to actually
Line 31.
inject here real quick, Representative Martin. We've got a lot of people waiting for, in the next committee, that's to follow us. If you don't mind, would you mind taking this offline, and you can have a conversation about it? We can talk about it in full committee, if that's okay.
sure. I just know that we don't take any amendments in full committee.
Oh,
That's at the discretion.
yeah, I was going to say that.
Okay, all right. Yeah, then I'll hold. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so with that, I'm open to entertain motions. Do pass. We got a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. We'll go ahead. I'm sorry, all in favor? I've already moved on to the next bill. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right. Let's let it begin. Appreciate it. Thank you. You moved on full committee. See you tomorrow at 3. All right. I may need to get a cup of coffee here. Let's see. The last one on the agenda is Senate Bill 170. Senator Jackson, thank you for being here today. We look forward to hearing about your bill.
Thank you, committee, for hearing me this day, and just want to very briefly go over this bill, and by way of introduction say I have spent the last 5 years of my life working with people who are experiencing homelessness, many of whom are across the street, and a lot of my work has been spent on the phone trying to get different agencies within the state to do the things that they said that they would do. And then only having to find out that one agency has helped, but another agency stepped in and has undone what we worked hard to get the other agency to do. And so that's from my own kind of lived experience of working in this field. And so this bill is seeking to address that by creating an interagency council, which will bring together all of the agencies across the state who interface with people who are experiencing homelessness. And it calls on them to meet quarterly to develop a coordinated plan for addressing homelessness across the state, a coordinated plan. I will say it's a pretty comprehensive list. A number of the agencies that are on this list called and asked to be added. When we first started, I think we had maybe 10. There was the people that I knew for sure, but there were several agencies who said, you know, hey, this would be really helpful for us too. I want to highlight especially the Department of Community Supervision, who does engage with a number of people who are on parole or probation and are in need of services, and they wanted to be a part of the conversation. This does have a sunset, so it's not forever. This is a 3-year agency or a 3-year council, so we can decide in 3 years if it's been effective, and if it hasn't been effective, then we can move forward. But the hope is that it would be really effective in helping us to combat this issue of homelessness.
All right, perfect. I'll open the floor for questions. Anyone? Okay. We've got one. Chairman Anderson.
Thank you, Senator. Just a real quick question. I noticed when you outlined this is a 21-member commission or panel that you're putting together here, and you state here that that the members who shall be appointed by the governor. Have you talked to the governor's office regarding this rather robust list of appointees?
So most of these appointees are all from departments. We haven't talked directly with the governor. I will say this came out of a Senate study committee that passed the report with this recommendation 3 years ago. We've had this bill around for a little while now in the Senate, and so I don't foresee this being a problem with the governor's office, but certainly we can have a conversation with them.
Okay, just a follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
Again, to follow up on that, the committees you have outlined here, are all of these committees, or I mean, all these departments on board with what you're talking about?
So yes, as I noted, we actually had people who came and asked to be on the list, and I have talked to a number of department heads asking. one of the big amendments that we made early on, so before you all ever saw this, was that we changed it to a member from an agency because every agency head, of course, did not want to be obligated to have to attend these meetings. And so that seemed to be the sticking point for them, is that they wanted to be able to send a designee as opposed to the head of the agency. So that was one of the compromises. But again, a lot of folks really did come and ask to be added to the list.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have one more question, and then we're going to move on to speakers. Representative Montahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a quick question. I know the Gateway Center here in Atlanta is pretty involved with homelessness. Have they weighed in on this?
So they haven't directly. Now, I work with the Gateway Center on a regular basis, and what we've done is we've allowed for there to be 3 service agencies or 3 service providers to be appointed to it. So the governor could choose to put someone from Gateway on this council, or it could be from a service agent providing agency from across the state. But there are 3 slots for places such as the Gateway to make sure that we get their perspective as well.
But as far as this proposed legislation, they have not come out in support of it.
I haven't heard anything from the Gateway Center. I know we have a number of people who there's some people signed up to speak for it, but certainly this has gotten really great and solid support from the community when it was on the Senate side, particularly for those who are experiencing homelessness and partner agencies like mine who work in this area.
Thank you.
Representative Bernal, can we hold the question, or do you want to? Okay, thank you. All right, so we have a couple people to speak in favor of the bill. Brian Nunez, Southern Poverty Law Center.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. I am Brian Nunez, Senior Policy Associate for the Southern Poverty Law Center, and I'm so happy to see SB 170 on today's agenda. For the past 2 years, we have been proud to work alongside Whip Jackson on this bill, and we deeply appreciate her leadership and commitment to advancing this effort. This bill has undergone thorough vetting, and all 21 listed entities fully support establishing this interagency council. Last year, we successfully passed it through committee, but we just, because of the time, but now we finally got it to y'all in the House. And just to provide some quick context for you, back in 2022, the Senate Studies Committee on Shelter Homelessness highlighted the urgent need for a more coordinated response. The recommendation aligned closely with SB 170, calling for a commission to bring together key leaders from the executive branch and other stakeholders to address this issue strategically. Then early last year, the Georgia Department of Audits and Accounts released a performance audit on homelessness spending. Their findings reinforced what we already knew. While Georgia invests significant resources into addressing homelessness, the state lacks a unified strategic plan. The audit specifically recommended that the General Assembly establish a statewide council to enhance coordination and impact. This approach is not new to us. Georgia used to have a similar council created out of an executive order in the 90s. Neighboring states like Texas and Tennessee have also created similar councils, leveraging federal resources and existing infrastructure to maximize efficiency. Georgia now has the opportunity to follow suit, bringing organization, strategy, and accountability to our efforts while ensuring that every dollar is used as effective as possible. Once again, we want to express our sincere gratitude to Whip Jackson for her leadership and dedication to this cause. Of course, also want to thank Whip Robertson and Chairman Summers as they are, the second and third co-sponsors of the bill. SB 170 is a critical step towards strengthening Georgia's response to homelessness, and we are grateful for this chance to collaborate on this important effort. Thank you for your time, and we will love your support on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Brian. Ms. Apley, I'm going to try and read all this. House ATL Corporation for Supportive Housing, Georgia. Did I get all that right?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Elizabeth Apley, and I'm here on behalf of Enterprise Community Partners, House ATL, Presbyterians for Better Georgia, the Corporation for Supportive Housing, the Georgia Supportive Housing Association, and 9 to 5 Georgia. And we join in thanking Senator Jackson for bringing this legislation. Georgia endured a 28% increase in homelessness between 2018 and 2024. We know that that followed years where our population of homeless people had been in decline all the way through 2017. Last year, we had more than 41,000 homeless school children in this state. The commissioner of the Veteran Services Agency in Georgia testified that 25% of our homeless are veterans. The fastest growing population among the homeless are seniors. And we know that foster children aging out of foster care in this state, that between 30 and 50% end up homeless by the time they're 26 years of age. So this is a serious and growing problem. We believe that Senator Jackson's legislation will help to bring the resources and work of this state to bear on a coordinated and strategic approach to the prevention and amelioration of homelessness. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Seeing none, thank you very much. Great presentation. All right. So that concludes all of our speakers on the bill. Representative Bernal, I gave you the commitment that I would recognize you, so thank you.
Thank you. I noticed that after the last speaker, that she talked about the large senior population. So will you all provide care for like dementia, Alzheimer's, and all those things that could possibly cognitive issues with seniors?
So I do know that there is a significant effort to make sure that there's supportive housing and supportive resources around folks who are housed. So when somebody receives a voucher through DCA or DBHDD especially, make sure that there are wraparound support. So if someone is experiencing something like you named, wraparound supports would be there to help to ensure that they can stay in the housing that the voucher pays for.
Okay, if they cannot stay in the housing, would they put them someplace else where they would be safe?
You've gone beyond my level of expertise.
Okay.
My job is to get people housed, and that's what I work on. So I'm sorry I
Thank you
can't
for
answer
the bill.
that
It's
question.
really great.
And thank you, Senator Jackson. One thing I always love about the Senate is you all have a study committee, and your results are we should put a study committee together. So I say that jokingly. With that said, this is going to be hearing only today, so we'll continue to have the conversation and we'll move forward. So feel free to reach out to some of us after the committee hearing. We'll talk more.
Okay,
So thank you. All right, so that concludes the agenda for today for the State and Local Government Subcommittee. Unless there's anything else at this point, I'm going to go ahead and call us adjourned. Thank you.